Well, hello everybody. This is Ron with Sandcar Services, and it is basically Christmas, coming up on Christmas week here next week. So, got trying to get everybody out. This is Eric's transmission. Eric's buying a Willwood slave cylinder from me. His cross shaft was bad. We're going to talk about that here real quick. As a matter of fact, I need to pause it and go find his cross shaft. There we go. We're back. I love that teleporting. So everybody needs to keep an eye on this, even if you're not bringing your transaxles in for service to a shop. And I like to just replace these with the heavy duty ones. They have the extra welds on them, which this one actually already has. There is a way to weld the top of this and then sand it back down and make it nice and round. But it should have a radius on it. If you see these big flat spots, as the throwout bearing assembly is pushed out with the forks, it's supposed to rotate nice and smooth. And I've seen over the last year, actually a handful of cars complaining after they put their transmissions back in from whatever builder they use, that they have problems with the throwout bearings failing prematurely and or popping off of the forks. If you don't have a nice even smooth radius on your cross shaft, you're going to fight clutch issues, which can damage your transmission, believe it or not. Clutches actually cause just as much damage to transmissions as driving styles do. So on Eric's transmission, this one came in with no known issues. He had a lot of in and out play on his input shaft. He has 0 now. But he had a lot of in and out play. He said roughly 18 thousandths of an inch. I didn't measure it because if you've got play, that ain't good. So if you're trying to pull your shaft in and out, not up and down, because without the engine on there, holding this in place, you're going to get up and down movement. So don't worry about that. But what it turned out to be, and this is something I wanted to go over, I do a lot of tech tips and try to help people out. So most of you are aware by now, I'm not a big fan of these 3-piece bearings. I've talked to quite a few pro builders. I think the best conversation I've had yet was with Dan Foltz, and I respect his opinion. But I won't tell you what was said because I can't really paraphrase exactly what he said. But he likes these bearings, but he also uses the CX11 too. So he's not against the bearing that I use. But here's the reason why I don't like these bearings. One, even though it's not a seal, it's a plastic housing. When the balls are in there and this thing's together, there's literally almost no space for oil to get in there. And I know they say there's no problem with oiling this bearing. I just would rather oil be able to splash onto this, because the forward bearing, which is back here in your gear carrier housing, is the single most failed bearing in a 2D or an E-box, just because of what it's doing. It's literally setting the preload and the spacing on your main shaft with all your gears. So what's happened with this one is the bearing didn't fail, but I'm seeing this over and over again over the last few years, and it's an easy thing to remedy, in my opinion, for trans shops that use this bearing. But if you look at the inside of the race, there's 2 of these races, one on each side. If you look at the inside of this race, you'll notice that it's beveled, right? Almost like a funnel. Well, the problem is that you have a thrust washer that's on the back of the main shaft right behind. It's literally the first thing on after 4th gear. And obviously these transmissions, when you stand on the gas with the power that we're putting to them, something's got to move somewhere. So they put a thrust washer behind 4th gear to prevent the main shaft from moving backwards. But you also have to be able to space the main shaft so the gears are lined up. So they have these things behind the thrust washer, and I apologize for not having a thrust washer to show you. I'm out of stock on them at the moment. And we don't change them very often, so it's not something I got laying around. But these are the shims that go behind the thrust washer before the bearing. So basically they're crushed between the bearing and the thrust washer. All right, so if you're with me on that, These shims come in like 3 thousandths all the way up to like 20 thousandths thicknesses. Now, 20 thousandths is a pretty thick shim. This one here is a 20. It's pretty hard. It doesn't want to flex, right? You get down to these, I don't even have a 3 thousandths here, but if you get down to these, they're really easy to flex the thinner they get. But the way some of the trans builders, if not all of them, I mean, I haven't seen any of them come in yet with this 3-piece bearing with the thickest washer of the shim stack up against the bearing. They always put the thinnest washer on the bearing side and the thickest one next to the thrust washer. The problem with that is that the thin washer will suck down into the concave under load and over time. And when it disappears and it's no longer in the stack, whatever its thickness is now play for the main shaft to go back and forth. And that's what I see a lot of. So if anybody's catching this and wants to relay that to their favorite trans builder, if you're going to use the 3-piece bearing, put the fattest shim towards the bearing so that because a 20 thousandth shim is not going to suck into that hole. It's just not going to happen. And these do not spin and rotate. They're just literally a spacer. So once they're crushed down by the 110 foot-pounds of torque on the end of the main shaft nut, they're happy campers. They're just there to set the gear spacing. So also on his transmission, he has bolts that are too long on his CVs. So we're going to notify him of that. He had a third gear bad that he didn't realize. And he had a pinion that was bad that he didn't realize. And then the very last thing is we updated his 3/4 slider. He has the Volkswagen slider, which only has the engaging flank cut back on 4th gear. Now it has all 4 engaging flanks cut back. So both sides of 3rd gear and both sides of 4th gear are now cut back. So Ron with Sandcar Services, thanks for watching. For those of you that have made it to the 7-minute mark, my car may very well be ready for a day trip in the next couple of weeks. So keep pulling for me. I don't work on my car during business hours, just after hours and on the weekends, and I'm trying hard, guys. So see you out in the dunes. Thanks for watching.